Yo. Right, let's get on. General Government Net Debt in Real Terms Index. Now, this is IMF stuff. This is kind of from 2007. The G20 got together, and a lot of the countries decided to pump it up, pump it up, pump it up, pump it up. And bottom right there, Italy was given a free card, that it didn't have to do the stimulus and was going to be allowed to be a free rider. Germany, I thought, did more stimulus, but it doesn't seem to be in this chart. France pumped it up slightly. Canada pumped it up, but it's bowing over now. And the UK did a lot of stimulus there, and looks like that's flattening out, but I'm not sure whether the bank bailouts are in that figure or not. Japan is just straight line upwards, as is the United States, with no sign of stopping at all in either country. And that is what's kept Japan afloat still as normal, and what has kept the United States economy at blah plus. And Spain, what is Spain doing up there? And that is what the world is asking. What is Spain doing up there? In the United States, this is a rather interesting chart. The NFIB poor sales in red and the unemployment rate in blue. Now, the NFIB is the National Federation of Independent Businesses. It's a survey that goes out to small, medium-sized business owners to say, what's holding you back in the world? And you get I've done the graph before. Sometimes they say it's interest rates that are hitting us, tax rates that are hitting us, but lately it's often been poor sales are the reasons why we're not doing very well. Poor sales are the reasons. So they've tracked that poor sales as an index and put it up against the actual unemployment rate for the United States, and it correlates quite nicely. And the NFIB poor sales in red is coming down and down. In other words, a lot fewer of the small business owners are saying we are now experiencing poor sales. Sales are getting better, unemployment rate coming down. And as yesterday we saw that the United States as a whole will soon be taking on, how should we say it, as much debt as they used to. Which is all good in a way, that the blah plus will probably continue, but always knowing that it's debt behind it. But then we can say that it's always debt behind it. Right. This is the Ceridian UCLA Pulse of Commerce Index that I've used many times before, which is diesel sales, and if diesel is sold in the United States, it's generally for trucking, and follow the trucking, and you can find whether the economy is doing a good or doing a bad. And you can see it's absolutely standard. Across the 2001 recession, it flattened out, got going again, trucking through the housing boom, fell precipitously down, it's classic stuff, in the Great Recession, and then got itself up again, but it's gone very flat. But this is strange, that miles driven are going down and diesel is going down. I think what we have is that the United States whole economy has just slimmed down slightly. It's slimmed down a size and got a bit more efficiency going for it. And I think that's what it is. Some people have been squeezed out by these efficiencies, but it's running a slightly tighter ship from what I would judge, which again you could say is quite good. But obviously there are some people that are being left on the sidelines that used to exist in that slightly fatter way of running. And for the moment, I think that one size down will keep them in blah plus. But the next time there is trouble, they'll have to slim down another size. And obviously, this is the American dream being squeezed away. This is a semi-tongue-in-cheek thing at the bottom, but it's serious enough at the top. It's from Bank of America Merrill Lynch. and they are asking their employees and the other people in the industry, in the money industry, what could go wrong. And EU sovereign debt funding is a black swan that could fly in and hit the turbines. Much bigger than anything else. Nothing else is really seriously considered. Premature fiscal tightening from the central banks, which isn't going to happen. Chinese real estate market collapses and the whole economy of China reverberates across the world. Other we'll get to below. Commodity price inflation, again, very small chance of it getting totally out of control and causing, say, Arab Springs around the world because of commodity price inflation. And municipal debt default in the United States. Meredith Whitney still wrong on that one. And other tail risks as submitted by the participants: Iran and Israel, close extraterrestrial encounter. In other words, we're getting, into the dregs here. Middle East conflagration, Japan, Middle East political risk, Iran, Israel, Euro collapse, European election chaos, US recession, greed in the financial sector. I think they've put that in for a joke. War with Iran, loss of confidence in central banks. Central banks are playing a blinder, in my opinion. They are absolutely playing a blinder. They have kept the whole thing on the road. And I think they'll have enough confidence now. How much do they put in? About 10 trillion between them? 9, 10, 11 trillion? If in doubt, they're so confident they've done so brilliantly that people like Mystic says, good on them. That if there's ever more trouble along the line, which there will be more trouble along the line, they'll just double down on that trillion that they've put on the table and keep it flowing, and maybe keep it going. US budget deficit, but that shouldn't be a problem. Japan, Middle East geopolitics, Iran war, Iran nuclear attack on Israel, more likely to be an Israel attack on Iran, isn't there? Extended disruption in oil supplies coming from that attack. But as you can see, besides the EU sovereign funding problem, these experts don't see any black swans flying into the turbines anytime soon. Reuters, the Bank of Japan, on Tuesday eased its policy by boosting asset purchases. The BOJ, the Bank of Japan, have gone out there for 130 billion more of asset buying. And it's half a QE and half ELTRO type asset swaps. The European Union is likely to take action against Spain's newly installed government by May for delaying austerity measures ahead of regional elections next month. And it's accusing them of intentionally fudging the 2011 figures so they can beat them easily with the 2012 figures. What can they do to them? This is the great thing. It's the European Commission believes new government overstated the deficit, but what can they do? Fine them? Spain's in enough trouble. It's a very difficult problem, but you could say in a way, good on them for now getting tough on their members who are being naughty. But who is it up to who to say who is being naughty? What criteria should be used? It's very tricky. To run a club, to run people. People are very tricky things. Portugal, next door to Spain on the Iberian Peninsula. Everyone, a lot of this everyone, but there are an awful lot of people in comments for the Financial Times and Financial Times articles saying Portugal isn't nearly as bad as Greece. Greece is it's a completely different book of badness, of naughtiness. But Portugal has got its problems, but we know that the German government were more likely to let Greece go and then put a buffer in by really helping Portugal. But the question is, can a country like Portugal really be helped? And some of these figures are to give us an idea of how Portugal is doing. Real GDP on a rebased at 100. There, Portugal always in blue, the Eurozone average at or the Eurozone itself in gold, Portugal a long way below the average. On the top right, it's a different way of doing it, which is real GDP change on previous quarter. Portugal plunging down, and the Eurozone probably will go negative next quarter. Unemployment rate is a lot higher at 14 than the Euro average at 10 to 11. Current account balance, this is quite interesting. The current account balance of the EU as a whole is flat. It imports as much as it exports, and Vicky Verka. But Portugal imports, it used to import 14% of its GDP more than it exported, but now that's got to a better -6. Gross debt is much more than the average, and government percentage of deficit as a percentage of GDP is worse than the average. Portugal is savable, but what do you do? How would you save a country like Portugal, which isn't as complete basket case like Greece? I mean, the idea was over the last 10 years that all these new infrastructure projects were going to the peripheral countries like Portugal to build new roads and new train stations and factories and really get themselves going. They obviously haven't got themselves going. So what could the new plan be? You can say that there should be a Marshall Plan for the peripheral countries, but there has been a Marshall Plan over the last 10 years for the peripheral countries, and it doesn't seem to have worked. What can Plan X/2 be? Finish with dollar bears in for a shock. Not quite finish. In for a shock if US cuts energy imports. So we're on imports and exports, balance of payments. The US balance of payments is very much skewed to the United States importing more than it exports. We saw Portugal at -14 and up to -6, but I think the United States has come in from -7 to about -3 or 4 at the moment, and again because I think they're slimming down. And this is an interesting article basically saying with the new gas that's coming online, they won't have to import as much energy, and the balance of payments will be better. But the US economy, even slightly slimmed down and only at the blah plus, is still going to use an awful lot of energy, and I don't really agree. And I can see the balance of payments staying quite happily around the -5. That's percent of GDP, which would be, I don't know, a big number. And finish with Nature, International Weekly Journal of Science, climate policy. You've got to pay for this, as far as I can see, for the article, so I can't read it. Oil's tipping point has passed, which is a good sounding headline. Good as in it's not these fluffy ones that says we've got enough oil to have baths in it for the rest of our lives. Oil's tipping point has passed. In other words, we are over the peak, I think that's saying. And the other highlighted thing is to whet our appetite for the article, but I don't totally understand it. The economic pain of flattening supply, so we've got that, the economic pain of flattening supply. We're over the peak, and that's going to cause economic pain because the prices are going to go up. Will trump the environment as a reason to curb the use of fossil fuels. And I think what it's saying is you can forget your global warming. We're going to have to slim ourselves down 2, 3, 4 more notches as time goes on, because we just won't have the fuel to use, and the fuel that is available will be jolly expensive. I think that's what they're saying. But again, you've got to sign up for the article and probably pay for it. But anybody that's got it that could feed it to me, I'd be very interested to read it. Thank you very much, and goodbye.